Hi, Habeeb. So we are live on Facebook now on our invitation page, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation and bringing some very unique cultural, I would say practices to India. So thank you so much, and to everyone, Habeeb is a Nigerian sex educator and he's a financial consultant, and he's a book lover. And I've seen so many books, like it's my go-to resource to know anything on sex ed. So yeah, Habib, yeah, welcome to I am Besharam. This is the I am Besharam page, and we are a sex positive page. And I thought of talking about Kunyaza because I've heard of a lot, and the name is so fascinating. So can you tell something about like the Kunyaza? What's Kunyaza?
Sure. And just before I start, I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me. And it's a pleasure again to speak to you again, Pallavi. Yeah, so Kunyaza is an ancient African practice originally from Rwanda and East Central Africa. And in essence, it's a non-penetrative clitoris tapping technique which elicits female ejaculation and orgasms in women during heterosexual encounters. And it basically involves a man using his male member or penis to elicit pleasure and hopefully resulting in female ejaculation or squirting or gushing orgasms. That's in
Okay.
summary what the Kunyaza practice is about. But there's a culture in history and a lot of heritage surrounding the practice. But that's what Kunyaza refers to. And the water that the woman expels during Kunyaza, that is known as Kunyara.
Oh, lovely. So, is it practice? Like, how is the awareness about this, practice of kunyaza? And would someone need special techniques? Like, if someone today is watching this and maybe they want to go and try kunyaza at home, so how would you take them through? Like, what exactly they should do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a relatively simple practice in terms of the actual technique itself, but there is a lot of preparation that needs to be done beforehand, both from the man and the woman to psychologically prepare for Kunyaza. So, I mean, it's very effective. I mean, there was a recent survey that found that 90% or 92% of women who experienced Kunyaza was able to
Yeah.
orgasm, and about 83% of women was able to squirt. So it's very effective practice. But one of the things that's important about Kunyaza, not only the tapping technique, because you need to tap in either a rhythmic way or going vertically or horizontally along the clitoral glands, as well as the labia minora, in order to tease the clitoris and tease the woman in order to elicit ejaculation. But something which a number of women who've experienced ejaculation from Kunyaza have said is the importance of letting go, the
Mm-hmm.
importance of intimacy with their spouse or their partner, and also the importance of having a relaxed mindset. Because if
Correct.
you're practicing Kunyaza, but you're especially for the woman, you're not engaged with your mind and body, it's going to be very difficult to let go and allow the feminine flow, shall we say, to gush out. So, whilst the technique itself can be relatively easy to undertake, in terms of the mental and psychological preparation and the woman owning her pleasure and giving herself permission to experience kunyaza, that's the most important thing. And that's where a number of, whether it's sex educators known as sengers or coaches in Africa, they will help the woman able to own her sensuality and able to kind of let go, because that's the most important thing. Because unfortunately, many people, especially many women, do not feel comfortable in their own bodies, and especially with a male partners, it can be quite difficult to kind of allow themselves or allow their body to experience pleasure. So there's usually a disconnect between the mind and the body. So that's why when I conduct kunyaza webinars or workshops, everyone is thinking about the goal, like squirting and ejaculation and everything, orgasms. But then I have to explain the process behind it and the culture. And it's not just about the tapping technique, it's making sure, like I said, first and foremost, both parties are psychologically and mentally ready and prepared to in order to experience pleasure.
Okay. And so I remember you had that prop. Do you still have that prop where you like kind of actually explained it? Uh,
Oh yes, sure, sure. So this is
ah.
yeah. So this is a Volvo puppet. It's known as a Volvo puppet, and you can see it's a lovely depiction of the female anatomy. You have the labia majora, which is like some people call it the vaginal lips or the labia lips or the vulva lips here, and then these are the inner lips. Now, obviously, every woman's anatomy is different, but this is just an example. And this here, I'm hoping you can see it. This is known as the clitoral hood or the prepuce.
Okay.
It's like the equivalent of the male foreskin, and then you've got the clitoral glands here, this round nub.
Wonderful.
Now the clitoral glands, and I'm specifically calling it the clitoral glands rather than the clitoris, because the clitoris itself, most of the clitoris sits within inside a woman's body. So if I were to show you, this is really what a clitoris looks like. It's in terms of the size, it's about 10 centimeters or 10 inches, depending on the woman. And it does actually erect. But most of this clitoris, like the legs and the bulbs, which you see here, they sit inside a woman's body, and they sit behind the labia minora, which is the labial lips. So when a man is going to, for example, perform kunyaza, for example, I'll use this massage balm. So imagine this is the man's penis. He'll be performing kunyaza whether he wants to do a tapping technique vertically, going up and down along the clitoral glands and also along the labia minora lips, not penetrating. So this is the technique, which is a non-penetrative technique. You can perform penetration later, but the whole point is to tease and gently arouse both the clitoral glands and the labia minora, which is also indirectly stimulating the inner clitoris. So whether you want to do it in a up and down, like a vertical tapping function, left to right, vertically, you can play with it, do circular motions. You can even write your name. Again, it's the whole point is to create and establish intimacy between their partners. And it's also effective for the man because it's teaching him not to think so much about penetration. And we know that most women, the most effective way to experience an orgasm is via clitoral stimulation. So this is why the Kunyaza technique is so effective, because number one, it concentrates on the clitoral stimulation and also allows the man to understand what turns the woman on. When during penetration, generally speaking, a lot of times the man, because of the position, he's not able to monitor and see how his female partner is responding. Whereas with Kunyaza, and there's different positions where you can practice Kunyaza, but generally he's focused and eye gazing at his female partner, and he's also monitoring her bodily movements, because most people communicate non-verbally as opposed to verbally. And especially if his partner is shy or she doesn't necessarily want to actually vocalize what she's really enjoying and what she's not necessarily enjoying so much, he can monitor by seeing how her body responds. So that's why it's a very beautiful technique, like I said, not only to elicit orgasms, but also to create and foster intimacy between the partners.
Lovely. That's wonderful. I mean, this is my second time at the class, and it's still like, it's like, okay, there is so much, a lot of times we just take it so intensely, like we feel like there is some chase line that where we have to reach. I think it just makes you stay in the moment, and it really forces you to not get, because I think even the bodies, they are not like, there is not so much of a movement. How is it like, it's more like a practice where you have to be a little still, unlike the, that in and out, like, that where it's, you just completely kind of don't stay with the moment. I think this is more like staying in the moment also.
Yes, most definitely. And it's a different sexual script to penetrative intercourse. Don't get me wrong, sexual penetration is wonderful, and it's something that both men and women can experience an orgasm via penetration. But this is another sexual script or another sexual play that both the partners can enjoy together. And also it teaches them to be patient and understand what arouses both partner, rather than kind of thinking about penetration, which generally that session ends when the man reaches climax. Whereas with Kunyaza, it's not obligatory for the woman to experience an orgasm or squirting. That's not the goal. The goal is female pleasure. The goal is to ensure that she's enjoys the experience. But if she wants to experience an orgasm and ejaculation and squirting, she can. But that's the most important thing, rather than it's putting women first. So women come first with the Kunyaza practice, and that's why for me it's wonderful, because generally when we speak about sexual practices, it's always focusing on men's satisfaction first and then female satisfaction secondary. So this is like the opposite, where again, like I said, women's pleasure is prioritized.
Lovely. Habib, are there any other cultural practices? Because you have read so many books, and you're almost like a, I would say, resource on, like, I've seen you reading Dr. Roth's book, and where it was like Jewish something on that, and maybe even you talk about the Islam and sexuality. So are there any other cultural practices around like sexuality as such?
Yes, most definitely. So obviously in different, like you mentioned a couple of key figures. So there are different, so even from the ancient Chinese in the Taoist tradition, we know of the famous and what is known as semen retention practices, or experiencing sexual intercourse without ejaculation. That's a practice that is widely practiced in ancient China, and also it's also practiced in parts of the Arabian world as well, where men are encouraged, or a lot of Muslims are encouraged to ensure that women are satisfied before the man is. And one way of doing that is by delaying ejaculation, whether you want to call it, like I said, semen retention or intercourse without ejaculation, and also understanding the difference between orgasm and ejaculation, because many times, especially in the case of men, people use the terms interchangeably, because 9 times out of 10, if a man is having an orgasm, he's also ejaculating. But it's possible that a man can experience an orgasm without ejaculating, which many people are not even aware of, a lot of men themselves. And that's why it's important for men to understand their own body and understand what their sexual potential is. So yeah, so like I said, semen retention is an example of a cultural practice that's widely practiced in parts of ancient China and part of the Arab Muslim world. You've also got in parts of West Africa, there is again a female pleasure orientated or pleasure positive practice known as kayan mata, which is basically it's a concoction of natural aphrodisiacs which are concocted by women, and they are taken, again, it doesn't involve any voodoo or anything like that. They're natural herbs and things like that, which they've got the reputation of increasing arousal in a woman, and also enabling her to self-lubricate easier. So that's another practice which is known as kayan mata.
What's the name of the practice?
Kayan mata, or that's the name of the tradition. Kayan Mata. It's called kayan mata, or sometimes it's widely practiced in parts of West Africa, particularly in Nigeria. You've also got, so we mentioned kayan mata, you've got the Tao tradition. I'm sure I don't need to educate your audiences about tantra and tantric sex, and even that is quite taboo as well, because from what I've been informed, there's a difference between what Westerns commonly associate to be tantric sex and what the original origin and essence of tantra is. So now how it's kind of taught in the Western world is basically a form of slow intercourse, where the goal is not orgasm, but the goal is in order to increase intimacy between the partners, and not to make it goal orientated, but make sure it's quite a pleasure orientated experience. And there are other various practices, like I said, in parts of the world. There are even holidays, like in Brazil, on the 8th of August is known as International Female Orgasm Day. That was enacted by a Brazilian councilman. And the reason why I enacted that holiday was because he wasn't able to bring his wife to climax, and he wanted like a date as a form of a sexual debt that he owed his wife, and also to educate people the importance of female sexuality and the importance of women feeling comfortable in their own skin, in their own bodies, and in order to help them experience an orgasm. And even sometimes even the wording, I think it's important that even for myself, and I've been corrected by others, rather than saying things like making a woman squirt or making an orgasm, especially for the man, is trying to help her orgasm, because women have the potential to orgasm and squirt. I believe every woman does, but it's not a case of they need necessarily a man to make her squirt. It's actually really a case of her partner helping her elicit or help her orgasm. So rather than looking at sex as something that as a man we are doing to the woman, or intercourse is something that we're experiencing together. So it's just about understanding, having a more broad understanding about what sex and sexual activity is. And this is why different cultures have different understandings, and it's more about pleasure as opposed to transactional sex or goal-orientated sex, which we kind of see in the modern world, not only in the West, but also in the East. It's all about how many times you can have an orgasm, how much you can squirt. So it's about just changing that mindset, where it's not necessarily about quantity, but rather it's about quality. So, and you know, there is a number of reasons behind that, but I think we've just become a culture that's been, in some cases, obsessed with sex, but not necessarily obsessed with pleasure. Because in terms of the mechanics of sex, it's very easy. Everyone and anyone can do it. But in terms of experiencing pleasure and heightened pleasure, if I might add, that's something that many people don't necessarily experience. So that's why I like to, research and study different cultural traditions and understand how they viewed sex and intimacy, and to try and debunk some of the misconceptions that people have So, for example, a lot of times religion is often blamed. And whilst I can understand in some cases religion has been detrimental to some people's sexuality, it's also been very positive and liberating for many people. So there are, like you mentioned with Dr. Ruth, she wrote a fascinating book about sexuality from a Jewish perspective and about it being a holistic and sacred experience for both the man and the woman to enjoy. Likewise, in Islamic tradition, you have many Islamic scholars dating back to the 9th century who wrote, phenomenal pieces of work on erotic literature and the importance of mutual satisfaction. So this idea that religion is anti-sex or anti-pleasure, I would argue against that, because even when many people speak of the Kama Sutra, that is based on it from a Hindu perspective, which is a religious perspective. So, and everyone takes from that. So I don't think it's fair to kind of say all religion is bad because some people practice some religion have used it, unfortunately, to control female sexuality or
Correct.
demonize some people. So it's about, just like I said, having a holistic approach and seeing different cultures and how they've understood intimacy and sexuality. I'll give you another example as well. So in North America, native North America, there's I'm not going to be able to pronounce the tribe properly, but I think it's Kudushka. And this is a native tribe, and where they speak about the different types of genitalia, both for the man and the woman. And they linked and they categorized the genitalia to different types. So like 8 types of genitalia for the man and 8 types for the woman. And the whole point of like categorizing the genitalia and naming them different things like the deer woman, the wolf woman, and these type of things, it was because the whole idea was that people would feel proud of their genitalia, irrespective of however it looks, the size, the shape, and what have you. So in this day and age, a lot of people are pressurized to kind of attain this so-called quote unquote perfect vagina or perfect vulva, whereas in ancient traditions, people felt more comfortable to embrace their body the way it is and the different forms of genitalia, and they were exposed to the different forms. And also it was believed that if you've got a certain type or size or look of your genitalia, it means certain things. Now, again, for me, what was fascinating about it was, like I said, they were taught from a relatively young age to see the variety of the different types of genitalia, and also for them to identify with, okay, maybe I'm more like such and such type. So they feel they didn't have this sense of shame in terms of the way their body looked. And I know I said I was going to say last point, but we have a similar tradition in Rwanda, where it's a bit of a controversial practice, but they in parts of Rwanda, and Uganda, and Kenya, parts of those countries, they practice labor elongation, where women's genitalia or inner lips are elongated. And the whole idea, which is quite fascinating, especially in comparison to how we look at the female genitalia in the Western world, and I'm assuming it might be the same in India as well because of porn, women were proud of having elongated lips, and it was seen as beautifying and beautiful. Whereas nowadays in the modern world, it's like a lot of people are obsessed to kind of want this quote unquote Barbie vagina, designer vagina, but it's tucked in, and in all honesty, kind of looks like trying to replicate a genitalia that looks like the Barbie doll of a pubescent child, which is quite problematic because of porn and some other outside influences. Where you've got other cultures, like I said, in native North America as well as parts of Africa, where they celebrate the different types of female genitalia, and it's not supposed to look one way. So that allows, I think, a woman to feel comfortable in her own skin and the way she looks, as well as for the man to embrace the different types of bodies, and again, genitalia in particular, because we see different examples of the female body shape and with the whole body positivity movement, but I don't think we see enough examples where women feel comfortable in terms of their genitalia and the way it looks, and how all types of genitalia sizes are normal. So I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to kind of educate people who've been miseducated from what they've seen in popular culture, porn, or from their friends.
Great. Okay. I mean, that's quite a knowledge. I mean, I really need to make notes because, some of it is like, and you don't find all of these in a single book. Like, all of this is like here and there. There is no single, is there a book where, someone can actually read about it, or it's like you are referring from multiple books and multiple sources?
A lot of them are from multiple sources. I mean, there are some really good books, like what is it called again? I think Sacred Sexuality, I think it's called. And that's on my Instagram page. I can't remember the names of the authors, but that speaks about the different cultural practices from the East. So they look at ancient India, ancient China, and some parts of the Arab world. So what generally you find with a lot of books is that they will look at one region or one part of the world. Because again, when we're speaking about the world and the different many cultures and things, it's very, very difficult to find, like you can say, an encyclopedia of pleasure, because everyone's got their own interpretations and understandings. And one thing I would say, and this is part of the work which I'm trying to do, is trying to enlighten people about the different cultural practices outside of the West and outside of ancient India. Because generally speaking, we hear a lot about ancient India, which is great with the Kama Sutra and Anuranga erotic treaties. We hear a little bit about ancient China and Taoist traditions, like I mentioned earlier. And we hear about the West from, Sigmund Freud, the sexologist, the sexual revolution, even up until recent times from the so-called discovery of the G-spot by Ernest Grafenberg. So we hear a lot from the Western perspective, but then we don't hear much about the contributions of Africans or Arabs as well in terms of sex and sexuality, because they've got their own unique perspectives. So that's why the work I'm doing is trying to understand some of those cultures that are maligned, and understand how they viewed sex and sexuality and spirituality as well as sacred sexuality. But there isn't I've not come across one book that's kind of includes all of the practices, but that's why it's a case of trying to dig around and kind of see where people are coming from, because again, no one's going to be exposed to all of the cultural practices. So I've only been exposed to a few, and there's a lot that I'm not aware of.
Great. Okay, Habib, just one last question, that being a sex educator and having a very I would say significant following across different channels, you would be getting approached by people with their sexual problems, men, women. So would you like to talk about some of the problems that you see people very frequently approach you for, like women and then men?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not a sex therapist. I just want to put that out. I'm really just, you could say, a sex educator, sex researcher, and I give and I facilitate some workshops and webinars. And I like to see myself as a vessel of beneficial knowledge. That's what I try. And so it's just imparting something that I found that's quite interesting, that might be beneficial to people. I might impart it or inform them of other maybe more professionals or sex therapists or other books or recommended books. So that's kind of just a little disclaimer in case people think I'm a sex therapist. But in terms of the questions, the most frequent questions I received, I'll split into two. So from men, it's a lot of the questions are around performance anxiety and how they can last longer in the bedroom, and also how they can make, how they can make their partner squirt, whereas I prefer to say how you can help her squirt. It's not you that's a doer, it's you're the facilitator. So it's mainly around squirting and orgasm, like trying to help their partner squirt to orgasm. And also for themselves, it's also a case of they're worried about performance anxiety and premature ejaculation. And a lot of it is because from what people have been miseducated by porn, and they've seen these elaborate sex sessions that they think they're supposed to last 35, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. They're comparing themselves. So that's the questions I generally receive from men. And then with the women, it's a lot of the questions revolve around whether it's squirting or orgasm, but a lot of the questions revolve around women feeling that they're inadequate or not normal. And that's because they haven't been exposed to different normal practices or types of normal, because a lot of the time I find women are comparing themselves to others, and I think that there's something is wrong with them because they're not able to orgasm like women in porn or from what they've heard from their friends and things like that. So that's why I try to impart authentic and correct information to eradicate the stigma, and also to normalize that sex or sexual practice is going to ebb and flow. You're not always going to experience mind-blowing orgasms. You're not always going to have extremely high desire. So to have a low desire is normal. There's obviously ways that you can increase that, but this idea that you need to, I think one of the problems, especially that I think a lot of women that have approached me have, is they kind of see them feelings of inadequacy where they feel that they are not normal or they're broken and all of these type of things. So I try to show a spectrum of normalcy, that there's not one type of normal. You're not supposed to always have a really high orgasm. So, and again, I think that if people learn to accept themselves, a lot of these so-called problems aren't really a problem, because really and truly, when you think about it, a problem is only a problem if you think it's a problem. So even if someone, for example, is having intimacy or having sex, sorry, once every month, if they're happy with that and their partner's happy with that, that's not a problem. The problem lies is when you think that you're supposed to have sex 3 times a day and you're supposed to have gushing orgasms every other day. That's when it becomes a problem. And that's why sometimes statistics, they do not help. So as much as even part of the work I'm trying to do is trying to reduce the orgasm gap, which refers to the fact that men orgasm more frequently than women during heterosexual encounters. It's not really a problem if the woman is comfortable with how often she climaxes. Whereas it's a problem if a woman wants to climax or orgasm more frequently than she is, then it becomes a problem, if that makes sense. So that's why sometimes a lot of the process is trying to understand or trying to unpack this so-called problem, whether it is actually a problem, or maybe people think it's a problem because they're comparing themselves to others. So that's that's why I try to, like I said, but I as much as I do receive a number of emails and messages, I can't respond to everyone. So that's why I try and just impart the little knowledge that I've acquired either online through my Instagram live, and I try to make it quite entertaining as well, and quite informative. So it's not just, oh, this is information overload, and it's not just something where I'm trying to be sensitive to people's needs, but at the same time, I'm just trying to normalize even having these conversations so people don't feel overwhelmed or underwhelmed to kind of understand and to learn about their own anatomy and their own sexuality.
Lovely. That's quite a session, I would say. I mean, personally, I think yeah, the problems are even here in India also. It's a similar problem, and I think it just gets, even despite being the land of Kama Sutra, people are very reluctant, very ashamed. They feel judged if they talk about it. So, I mean, slowly and steadily things are opening up. Seema Anand, she is someone who has been a very significant figure, and there are people. So I'm so glad that it was really wonderful to have you here, Habeeb, and bring up this cultural aspect. I was very keen because the moment I started following your work, that was something which very fascinated me. Is your zeal, like as you said, that the vessel of the knowledge. I think that's wonderfully you have described it. That's what the world needs, more than a treatment, more than a therapy. It's something that starts with the acceptance, and the examples that you elicited, especially the tribal one, like where they have different names, and it feels so amazing to even think that there could have been some community where there is so much of acceptance. Yeah. Yes. So thank you so much. And this video is also recorded on our page, and I will be sharing also this too on my personal pages. And yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.